Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Pit Lane, a Formula One podcast where we discuss everything F1. In this episode, we'll recap the Mexico Grand Prix along with a very brief preview on the Brazilian GP next weekend. I am your host, Jordan Wynn. Joining me today as a co-host is a longtime friend and fellow F1 enthusiast, Mikhail Payne. Welcome to the podcast, Mikhail.
What is up?
How are you doing after this long weekend?
Good. I'm excited to actually talk about this. This race happened to be a lot more exciting than I thought it was going to be. So, yeah, let's go.
Start with a little bit of news. Kind of going back to last weekend with the disqualifications. They gave us the measurements of the plank wear of the disqualifications. Ferrari's plank wear was very minimal at 0.3 millimeters, which is negligible.
As I figured it would be. I mean, you get down to all that, and it's very rare that someone is doing something so out of the ordinary. But I still think it's weird when you have a whole team, a factory, engineers, all this stuff, and things like this slip by.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, well, he got caught. It is what it is.
Just one of those things, setup changes and stuff. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. And it sounds like Mercedes was a little bit greater than that. This weekend, Mexico GP, I think there's one special livery. I know we're pretty heavy on the livery talk last weekend.
Yeah.
But Alpine had a little bit of Castrol colors, which is the same as the Mexico flag colors on their car.
And boy, did it pay off.
It's hardly noticeable, but just something to note.
Yeah.
But getting into, you want to start with qualifying, or just want to go straight into the race where the action was?
Let's start off with qualies, because there was some fun things that happened there, I think.
So, big highlight in Q1, Lando out first round, P19.
And why was Lando out in Q1?
Sounded like he had an issue initially.
Would you maybe call that issue Alonso spinning in front of him?
That doesn't hurt. That doesn't help. But yeah, he his first run came late at about 6 or 5 minutes left in the session, and he made a big mistake.
They didn't let him out until quite a ways. So, they were already struggling, but when there was the hard cut to a yellow and Alonso's facing the wrong way, and he had a whole field trying to
improve their times,
get their last lap in, that got pretty rough. And don't get me wrong, again, issues, but I think Alonso being spun around definitely, I think he would have at least made it into Q2.
Oh, definitely.
And I even heard the team radio of Alonso asking when he was allowed to re-enter, they were like, everyone's coming. So
it basically cost everybody their second lap. Just about.
And I think they originally told they told Lando to slow down, but at that point it was already too late. He had gone through. But yeah,
nothing you could do at that point.
That started a mess. Also in Q1 is when we started the fun at the end of the pit lane of Max and Russ just deciding to
back it up,
make the pace of qualies. And
we saw this before at a couple other racetracks that they were holding everybody up to try and build a gap.
And that's when they started really reinforcing the rules. So what I thought was funny is they didn't really get on Max as much because he was still technically rolling.
Yeah.
But then when Russ got to the end and just straight up parked it, is when everyone went wild. And that's when they said they were going to investigate Russ for being static at the end.
And it turns out they were investigating probably 4 people in total, but nobody ended up with penalties.
But then in hearing, too, everyone in that car park, all the drivers were not happy. And they had their team radio yelling at them to go, start getting going. And they're just like, I can't, I'm stuck. What are we doing here? So, I haven't seen that in a while. And that was interesting that they brought that tactic, if you want to call it, back. Because, and then I think maybe one other thing just for Q1 is Stroll was out.
Yeah, Stroll's out again. I mean, that's not huge news.
No,
it's kind of par for the course and not helping his cause.
With what everything Aston Martin has been going through, how they came out at the beginning of the year, and now how these last handful of races, and he's always been having his issues, but he's really, really putting his neck out there. I think most Formula One fans can agree how much longer are we going to keep letting him have a seat?
As long as Papa Stroll is paying the bills.
Cha-ching. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
But yeah, other than that, no real big surprises with Q1. Ocon out as well. But Alpine's kind of up and down with that anyways.
Right.
We can kind of get into the surprises qualifying. Don't call it a comeback. He's been here before. Daniel Ricciardo. P4. P4. Great session for him. He was fast all weekend long leading up to that point, and he backed it up.
Yeah. Perez, even just in Q2, struggled. I think at the end of Q2, he was 9th. And then, going into the end of qualifying at Q3, when I saw that Ferrari were 1 and 2, I was like, wow, congratulations, boys. But
yeah, it was a big surprise. Both of them 1-2, lock up the front row. Max ended up P3, and his old teammate right behind him.
And Rick splitting the Red Bulls. I'm like, okay, he's back. He's ready. Also, Piastri being up there too. I think, again, Norris probably would have been joining him.
Yeah.
But Piastri in the last handful of races has really been,
he's been
showing that he deserves the seat.
Yeah,
and
especially as a rookie.
Yeah, and it's been cool to see. I just knew when I saw Ferrari, unfortunately, this is just the way I am. When I saw Ferrari in 1 and 2, I was like, well, that'll be fun for a little while.
Yeah, I think I saw that it was 10 poles in a row for Charles where he doesn't win
and he doesn't win,
which is
a pole
crazy.
Poles without wins, and that's a stat. And I'm usually not great with stats, the numbers. I like to just dive into the weekend and have fun watching it. But every now and then they pull out those numbers and it hits you. You go, oh no.
Yeah, but it does show how quick he is over a lap when he puts it together.
And I think, rounding out Q3, we had the AlphaTauri boys, Bottas and Zhou, that were hanging in down there, ninth and 10th.
Alfa Romeos.
Oh, yeah, my bad. Sorry.
They P9, P10 was great for them.
But yeah, that was kind of, I feel like they've been struggling a lot. Yeah. More so than they should. And the fact that they even got there, I was just like, okay, they're mid-pack. Here we go.
Yeah, they showed some pace. Led them hopeful for the race to kind of hold on to their position and maybe gain on Williams in the standings.
Right.
And going to the race, well, all hell breaks loose. Big start for Max at the beginning of the race, splits the Ferraris, and then Checo comes flying around the outside because he also had a great start. It's a long straightaway to turn 1. Checo sends it.
Yeah. For a whole country. To make a whole country's youth start crying all within the first corner of a race. The Red Bulls just launched. Yeah. And it was awesome to see because right away I'm like, I knew it. The Ferraris were they're 1 and 2, but no. And yeah, when Max got on the inside of Leclerc and they kind of pulled the inside and Checo saw that opening on the outside and he had the speed for it and just went, and it all came crashing down when they ran out of room going into a corner that 3 cars cannot make it through.
Right.
And before they even showed the replay, I knew it was 100% Perez's fault.
Yeah.
Leclerc had nowhere to go. He was still wheel to wheel with Max pulling into that right-hander. And I think Checo just realized he was out of room and had to turn. And it just so happened he went wheel to wheel with Leclerc and sent himself flying off.
Yeah, he turned a little bit. I wouldn't say he turned early. He turned to make the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Leclerc was still there. Checo even said after the race that he was surprised that Leclerc broke so late, but you can't really blame him.
Well, when you have Max on the inside too,
and fighting for the lead, right? And Max on the inside, and
right,
3 wide going that corner rarely works out. I know Max did it a few years ago against Bottas and Hamilton, but I think Bottas backed out, so there was the space there. But yeah, it definitely didn't pay off for Checo and took him out of the race, lap 1.
Which is wild because I would think of any one race that you would just hope Perez would just finish in the top 5, it would be his home GP. But instead, I don't know if it was just because the crowd and his home and and he's got amazing fans that are everywhere around the world.
Yep. Everyone was there to see
yeah,
it.
That was his race. And if he could have at least been up there, they would have still just loved the show.
Yep.
But instantly that changed the vibe for the whole entire Grand Prix of just like, oh, whoops.
Yeah, especially that Grand Prix usually feels like a big party.
It is.
Everyone's there. You have that stadium section, which is great. And they're always cheering.
And we can touch on it later maybe if we want, but I remember with events that happened, how the announcers were saying how certain parts of the stadium were just, people were leaving.
Yeah.
Like and it was like half full because once Perez crashed, there was like, well, what's the reason for us to be here?
Yeah, I remember them showing a shot of like poor kid crying in the stands.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly, like Checo fan.
Loaded out in Red Bull, and it's like, oh, no, buddy.
So that was lap 1.
Yeah, it was wild. I think the only other thing to take away from that was Leclerc did sustain front wing damage, and they were kind of worried about if he was going to get penalized for running around having that little flap of car.
Because we've seen Haas, that happened to Haas quite a bit. I think last year.
Yep.
Mostly K-Mag. It would happen like 3 races in a row, it felt like, where he ran around with a broken wing for like 2 laps, 3 laps, and they didn't. And then they pulled him in.
Right. And for me, I was kind of watching it going, I see why they're not going to pull Leclerc in right now, because they're going to instantly destroy any kind of track position they had. But also, it wasn't terrible to the point where if he was taking a corner and it flew off to the side, I don't think anyone really would have batted an eye at it. But then, of course, it had to come off right underneath his wheel into the middle of a corner. And
right.
So other than that, yeah, it was mostly Perez sending it, Leclerc taking a little bit of wing damage that he actually rode out the whole way, if I'm correct, right? I don't think they ever ended up fixing that wing.
Not until the red flag.
Yeah. Exactly.
But we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. All right.
Yeah, we can kind of stick with Red Bull here. Max wins the race, kind of just going away. Red flag came back, kind of reset the field, but once the restart went, he was gone again.
It's just that it's kind of that classic thing is once Max gets out in front,
controls it.
You know you're going to be watching all the other fun battles going on, and it's like, well, we'll see you at the end there, bud.
Right.
Like
that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah. Once that move happened at the very beginning, and Sainz, it looked like he did back off because he was getting pinched into that inner corner, the right corner there, and Sainz let that 3 pile go into the corner in front of him, and Sainz just kind of followed the pack through. I think that was the best thing he could have done. But no, once Max gets out, just like the old days of Ham, once Hamilton would get out in front, you would just know.
It's wire to wire.
We'll check you later. We're going to watch all the fun that goes on behind you.
That's right.
Yep.
So, yeah, I guess not much else to check on with Red Bull there. Another standard weekend for Max, it felt like. It's kind of going other than starting P3, but yeah, he took the lead, turn 1, and never looked back. And get into Mercedes with Hamilton. Ended up P2 in the end. He had quite the race. He was stuck behind Ricciardo at the beginning.
Yeah, I think Ricciardo was able to hold him until, I want to say lap 11. And knowing Max was driving off into the distance, into the sunset, okay, what else do we have going on here? And watching Ricciardo defend against Ham was actually a lot of fun because we haven't seen that in a long time.
No.
And Ricciardo was making some really good moves. He wasn't moving under braking or swerving, just making really good calculated
car placement.
Yeah, and it was fun to watch. And eventually when Ham did get around him, I did kind of give the old golf clap of well done, boys, that was fun.
Yep.
And it kind of brings you back to how many years ago.
Yep.
So, no, that was good. I really liked that.
Yeah, and once Hamilton kind of we got to Ricciardo and Hamilton, got past Ricciardo, got past Sainz. Red flag came out with Kevin Magnussen's crash. I guess we can get into that now, as the red flag is kind of important to this story.
I would say it's maybe the second most important thing that happened.
Yeah. Magnussen ended up running wide, coming onto the front straight, potentially damaging his car, gets back on track. Subsequently, mid-lap, something breaks in his rear suspension. Looked like a left rear. Something just went awry and just went straight into the wall, spun into the wall.
Yeah, the camera just happened to cut to him on lap 31 when he went wide on the main straight, and he was eating up all the marbles, all the debris, everything. And all I thought to myself was, his tires are garbage now.
Yeah.
And I didn't even consider the damage he was taking while he was slowly kind of off-roading there. But then, yeah, they hard cut to, well, and I always look to the top left of the screen to look for the yellow flags.
Yeah. Yep.
And more often than not, you see a yellow and you go, oh no. But then they'll take it back because someone just went wide, spun out, kept going. Yeah. And that yellow was holding. And then when they cut to Meg, I was just like, that was a brutal looking
the car looked pretty bad.
Yeah. And I was happy to see him jump out, but also it's because I'm sure in his view, it looked like the car was on fire because, well, the car kind of was on fire. The brakes were burning up. But yeah, when they showed the replay eventually of that left rear snapping inward while he's trying to turn right and just sent him into the wall, I mean, it's scary. But the one good thing is that right away he was hopping out of the car.
Yeah, hopped out.
Okay.
He was shaking his hands a little bit, it looked like. But yeah, hopped on to the Tech Pros, got safe.
Right.
But then subsequently that brings out the red flags because they need to fix the barriers or at least check them. Red flags of race, getting back to Hamilton, slams on the medium tires while Ferrari, Max both have the hard tires on.
Yep.
And he ends up flying by him. No problem. Tires don't wear out. Seems like he was just fine on them the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Ends up pretty far ahead of Leclerc, pretty far up the road. And yeah, pretty comfortable P2 in the end for Lewis once he got by the Ferraris.
Yeah, and I was, for many, many years, an anti-Hamilton fan just because I kind of like to root for the underdog, and I have a lot of other drivers that I think are fun to watch, and I just got to the point where watching him win all the time was just getting old for me. But it's races like this where I look and I'm like, good for you, dude. You drove such a good race.
Yep.
You managed it well. You didn't kind of go into sometimes your classic state of complaining about anything you could find. You drove it, and it was fun to watch, and I was actually very happy to see you get second.
Yeah.
I was like, good on you. Great.
Yeah. He is a 7-time world champion for a reason.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean,
he knows what he's doing most of the time.
But then there are some of the other races where things go awry, and it just seems like all he was doing was trying to blame anything and everything going on around him. Where this race, it really felt like he kind of was more in the zone than he has been lately, and he drove incredible. It was fun to watch, and I was glad he got that.
You can see he's getting a lot more comfortable in the car with the upgrades and stuff that they brought, that it's kind of suited his style a little bit more, and there might be something to look out for next year. Not to say that they'll take over Red Bull, but at least maybe a little bit more competitive at the start of the year.
Yep.
But that's yet to be seen. We can move on to Russell here. Russell ends up P6. He's kind of, I don't want to say he was nowhere because he was P6, but it kind of felt like he was just kind of meandering through the weekend, meandering through qualifying, kind of stayed, top 6, top 8, but then race time kind of just stood pat again. Another one of those weekends where he didn't really show anything.
He's been starting, in my opinion, to become, not always, but usually in the top 10, but usually in the middle to the back of the top 10. It seems like he's been, just struggling. I don't know. Also, when he comes over the radio during the race, he sounds frantic on the radio, it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Where usually a lot of the back and forth is either calm or someone's kind of annoyed at the situation, where he sounds like he's breathing hard and yelling back at just like he is. And don't get me wrong, I get it, what they're, but he never seems happy or calm. It's always...
Not recently.
No.
Especially not when he came out of the pits behind Albon. He was not happy about that.
Yeah, he definitely wasn't. There was a whole back and forth about that.
But in the end, P6 for him.
Yeah.
Again, nothing too impressive with that drive, I don't think. He held off Ricardo at the end. Ricardo almost came back at him. And we can kind of go there next since we're talking about him. Ricardo, huge drive for AlphaTauri this weekend. Like we said, he qualified P4, and that's huge. Just start there.
It was awesome.
And ended up P7 in the end. Bagged a whole bunch of points for AlphaTauri, 6 points, and for his first points of the year as well. Puts them ahead of puts them tied with Alfa Romeo, but ahead of them
because of his track position.
Yeah, highest finishing.
So when I saw that he got 4th in qualifying, much like the way that I felt about Ferrari being 1 and 2, I was very happy for him. But all I thought to myself was, great qualifying.
It's going to drop like a
You're not
stone.
going to be there, buddy. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, the low fuel, and, you know, it depends on who you get behind, where you are, if you're getting pulled. Amazing qualifying. Did not expect him at all to still be up there by the end of the race. He crushed it. And another reason I say that is because his little friend that we're going to talk about in a little bit here is really making him look so much better. Yuki is just being a wild child lately.
Yeah.
And so for Danny to come out and do this on the weekend that Perez did what he did at the beginning.
Yep.
It's just bringing up all the arguments that I've been hearing and seen of
The rumors of
the old Red Bull switch around. And Red Bull's notorious for moving drivers around faster than I think many other teams normally would.
Well, we saw, I mean, especially more recently with, Gasly getting moved up and then instantly dumped before the end of the year for Albon. So, yeah, tough for Checo, but Ricardo looked good there.
Looked great. And I think everyone who is a Ricardo fan, that in alone was a fun weekend just to finally see Danny back in a position where he's a threat.
Yeah.
Or, like I said, even earlier in the race when he was holding off Ham for a while. It was just fun to watch. It stinks when you have a driver that you really like and they're out for a little while and they come back on a different team and they're just not even competitive.
Yeah. They're almost a shell of themselves.
And this was great.
Yeah.
So.
It was excellent to see, especially after the Texas weekend he had, the USGP. But so huge weekend for him. Again, P7 got 6 points for AlphaTauri, moved him up 2 spots. I think it banks him another $20 million right now if the standings hold for that team. So that's huge.
Yes.
And we can get into his teammate Tsunoda running. Well, he had to start at the back, engine penalty.
Yes.
First one of the year for them. So he ended up at the back of the field. And he was running great. Pitted early with Lando. They were coming through the field together. Red flag helped him out as people were pitting and they were moving up. I think he was P8 or 10 at the time of the red flag. So he got fresh set of tires and then sitting behind Piastri for a while once the race restarted. Started challenging him one lap and then...
He was driving like a madman. Get to it. He
Yeah.
was driving like a madman.
like a madman.
It was lap 8. He caused the first yellow of the race because him and Magnussen got into it.
Oh, I forgot about that
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
And so right from the get-go, I remember yelling at the TV going, Yuki, what are you doing? Just calm yourself. Because lately he has been having some troubles with whether it's his fault or not, car issues, not doing well, And right in lap 8, it was the first yellow of him passing Meg, and they got into it. And then, yes, after the red flag, I'm just going to jump to it.
Yeah.
He back-to-back did the same exact thing in the same corner that only resulted in him, I think, losing all willpower to win or drive in this race. I think it was lap 48. He was trying to get around Piastri. He nicked Piastri, sent Piastri into a little drift that he held on to. And again, I'm yelling at the TV going, just wait. It's okay.
You'll get him.
And
You'll
they
get him.
they go around, and at the same, I believe it was corner one again.
Yeah, it's T1.
And he sent it even harder into him, and then he goes into a full. And it's just like, you didn't learn from the last lap, where you almost just took each other out, and you did it even harder this time. The same move, and then Yuki's yelling over the radio. He's mad. And then I think later on in the race, over team radio, they said, the cars in front of you, you can beat.
Yeah.
And he just sat back there.
Well, his confidence was gone at that point.
Well, right. After what happened, I get it. But I'm like, buddy, yeah, that was.
He knew he had a fast car. He knew where his teammate was.
Well, that's just it. And then you see how well
you
see how well Danny's doing.
Yep.
And then you're back there, potentially causing 3 separate accidents throughout the day. I'm just kind of like,
let's not forget that it's not just Ricciardo's potential Red Bull seat to get as well. Like, Tsunoda could get it too. Realistically, probably not. But
I don't think Yuki will ever make it in the top Red Bull.
He won't. But at least he needs to show that he deserves the seat.
Yeah.
Or deserves a chance at the seat.
No, and there's been lots of little flashes with him where I root for him. I never want to see him not do well.
Yep.
But lately I've just been like, okay, reel it in there a little bit, bud. But
yep. We can get into, so Tsunoda took himself out essentially, ended up P12 of the race, could have bagged 4 to 1 point at all to give him a little breathing room in Alfa Romeo, but so I'm sure the team's not happy. Franz Tost is not a happy camper. But we can get to McLaren. We kind of skipped over them. Lando, Q5, huge drive from the back of the field. Again, he started way at the back, was out in Q1, came back twice. He, again, kind of with Yuki, pitted early, came back, I think restarted the red flag at P8. Horrible start.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, horrible start. And I think he got caught behind an Alpine or somebody at one point, and he had to let off the gas, and then everybody just went around him.
Everyone was all eyes on the front handful of cars at that restart.
Yep.
And then once the dust settled, everyone looked and went, why is Norris in P15?
Right.
Like, what happened? And then when it turned out, it looked like he had wheel spin on the start. I would say terrible circumstances for him, but hands down driver of the day.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
Yeah. Great drive. Ended up P5 in the end. After
he came back after that red flag, and after that, whether it was his fault or not, that total botched start, he drove like a monster.
Yeah, you could argue 2 comeback drives today.
Yeah, at the beginning, like he had 2 separate races where he's just like, gotta do it again.
Yeah, and if he had qualified well, he probably would have ended up P2, P3.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have won the race, but he would have been there with Hamilton.
And maybe it was just the circumstance of where he was at and what had happened, where he just flicked something on.
Yeah.
Because he drove like a monster. Yeah. And it was so cool. While we're watching the front pack and seeing what's going on there, every other lap, Norris, another one. And another one. But no, he killed it. That was amazing for him. Obviously, it stinks that he couldn't get a podium or whatever, but I think that right there were certain days where his teammate Piastri, it was like, he's doing quite a bit better than Norris. Like, there are certain days where it's like, wow, Piastri's really going to prove himself. And this race, I mean,
no contest.
Norris machine.
And I think they had the interview with Piastri too, where he knows his limitations right now. Anything with major tire wear he struggles with, it's obviously a learning curve.
Well, yeah, he doesn't have the experience.
Right, on these tires. Yeah. So, but he'll get there. It's good he notes that. He ended up P8 today, Piastri did. Kind of mid-pack drive, respectable, just kind of hanging in there as a rookie. But yeah, still bagged points for the team after I don't think he got any points last weekend at Coda. So it's good for him there. We can move on to Williams. Alex Albon, 3 points finishes in a row, ended up P9.
Yeah, and, for anybody else, I'd just be like, you raced, good job. But for Williams, it's good. Like, it is good. And I think also, too, his non-existent teammate is he's out there for Williams by himself, essentially, I feel like, the majority of the time.
Well, he has, 25 of their 26 points?
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And not trying to totally just tear Sargent apart because, yay, our American driver. But he...
Right.
I mean, and, he's a rookie, whatever. Albon's got a lot of experience, I guess you could say. But I don't know. I still struggle with Albon in that. Yeah, he got the Williams to 9th, but at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't really. I don't know. It's tough.
You feel for him because he's not with a better car, essentially, because he's clearly showing what he can do. And maybe
I think he's showing what he can do with a Williams, but when he was with a better car, he was struggling.
Yeah, but he was so young then too. Again,
Yes.
he got promoted as he was a rookie. He got promoted that same year. I remember in testing he had they have the green flashing lights, meaning he didn't have enough points or something is what it was, or seat time in F1 car or whatever. And then he got promoted that same year to the Red Bull team. So I don't think that did him any favors, and going up against Max clearly isn't doing anybody any favors.
Right.
Albon P9, it's good for Williams.
Yes, good. I mean, good on him. It
stretches him out a little bit, keeps him in front of AlphaTauri. Currently, Sargent ended up DNF actually. They had a fuel pump issue late in the race, which I didn't realize until after the race.
No one realized it until the race was over because everyone was getting ready to cross the line and they pulled him in, and the disappointment in his voice too was why. I mean, he was sitting there questioning why, like, no, like, we're right there. And they're like, just, we've been managing issues, bring it in. And so I can see in his eyes too, especially being a younger guy, he even just finishing the race for him is huge. Yeah. But also too, the fact that nobody really notices that you finished the race or not does kind of show that you were so far back.
It shows where he is. Well, he was P12 after all the happenings before the fuel pump.
This is true.
We had a few DNFs, later on as well. But so yeah, Sargent ended up DNFing. We can get to Alpine. Ocon with a P10, Gasly P11. Another Alpine weekend, it feels like. Middle of the road. Didn't qualify great. I don't know if it's a track thing or what, but yeah, they just don't seem to go well
I think
lately.
It's just an Alpine thing, to be honest with you.
I think it is too.
They're the most, I think, currently run-of-the-mill middle. Yeah. Just constantly, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I mean, they're just not blowing your minds because they're doing so bad, and you're not cheering for them because they have a chance to do so good. They're just always... Right. They're just always there. And I was joking with you a while back and some of my other friends that I think Gasly is the least polarizing driver of all time. That he never really does terrible, but he never really, rarely can do that good.
He got a race win. He does have a race win.
I'll give you that. But I'm saying it always seems like he makes Q3 or he's high Q2. And then at the end of the race, he's usually in top 10 or right there. But rarely does anybody talk about him. Rarely does anybody, or does the cameras cut to him about like a move that's about to happen. That it's just he's always there and just hanging out.
Well, such is the life of a middle-of-the-road team that is not really contending even semi-consistently with the top teams, but yet not far enough back where they're struggling with the back markers.
Well, right. I mean, they're not, not to be too big of a jerk about it. They're not Alfa Romeo. They're not Williams. They're not, they're clearly better than them, but they're not competing with the top boys.
Right.
And So it just seems like every week, unless something catastrophic happens or Ocon decides to make a clever move and they are out of the race, it's like they're just there.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
all right.
And I do think they had a better start to the year other than, actually when they're running, but definitely back half of the season, not a lot to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
Haas, Hulkenberg, P13. He was in the points toward the end of the race, and then his tires dropped off. Nothing he could really do there. Like we said before with K-Mag, crash, brought the red flag out. Another poor showing for Haas with their upgrades. Not sure if they figured it out yet. Clearly not how it runs to get the right setup, but got another weekend this weekend coming up to try and nail it.
Personally did have a really happy moment with Hulk when he was leading the Hulk train of Ocon and Gasly. For whatever reason in Formula One, when someone is able to just hold up a whole crew of people, it makes me
DRS train.
It makes me very happy. And I think Hulk was able to manage that for around 10 laps or so, where Alpine just could not get around him.
Yep.
And I think at one point they ordered team orders for Gasly to swap out with Ocon and be like, you got to give it a try because this guy. Right. And all he was doing was creating a gap. And every time they cut to it, especially on the long straights, and you just see Hulkenberg driving with a line of cars behind him.
Yep.
But the problem is Alpine just couldn't get him.
Yeah, they just didn't have straight line speed this week.
And there was just there was that little bit. And then I think at one point, Ocon called in to team radio and said, let Haas know that I'm coming. And it was one of the most kind of douchiest things I've ever heard on a team radio.
And I think the commentary was, better not let the FIA hear that or something.
Yeah, but he's like, just let him know I'm coming. And I'm like, okay, Ocon, like have fun with that. Right. But no, that was my one. Hulk was kind of just, he was doing his thing all weekend. But that, I think it was around lap 40 to lap 50, or maybe it was even a little bit before that. But every now and then you see all these battles, all this stuff, and then they cut back to Hulkenberg leading the boys in the back. And I'm like, all right.
We're still here.
Yeah.
So the Haas's weekend, another not great showing. We can get an Alfa Romeo. Joe P14. Didn't hear much about him during the race. Not a lot going on. Bottas, P15. He was higher up earlier in the race, and then, for Alfa. But he ended up pitting right before the safety car, so that sent him back, and then subsequently the red flag came out, so he lost position there. It also sounded like after the race they found tear-off visor in his brake duct, so that would cause some issues for him. But he also made contact with Stroll toward the end of the race, and through the stadium section, and really was his fault, as Stroll was actually quite a bit in front of him. 5-second penalty in. I think that's what dropped him to P15.
Yeah, when I saw that, I wasn't even mad. I just was like, it is what it is. He hit Stroll, which I can't imagine Stroll has tons of fans out there, but it was very obvious it was Bottas' fault. Yeah. But I think even the announcers were like, they're putting on a show for the stadium. Yeah. Give him a little something to cheer about at the end of the race. And yeah, at that point, what do you really when it comes to Bottas? Why even do that at that stage of the game? Right. You guys aren't really fighting for anything at that point. Just if he has you, break, let him go. But no, he kind of just gave him the old
little love tap,
and he spun around, and the fans went wild, and it's like, okay, boys, well you're not in the points anyway.
And to be fair, that was a pretty good move by Stroll around the outside there. And
it was, whether I want to admit it or not.
Yes, it was a good move. It was a good move by Stroll. In the end, didn't mean anything as he DNF'd from that contact from Bottas, which kind of leads us to Aston Martin here. Double DNF. Alonso DNF'd earlier after the red flag at some point. Brought him in. He had no pace all weekend long, and Stroll DNF'd from the contact. So Aston Martin still dropping like a stone.
The fall from grace from where they started out at the beginning of the season.
Yep.
I think when again, not so much Stroll. I think Stroll is constantly struggling. But when Alonso came out at the beginning of the season in that Aston, I was like,
the car looked like it might win races.
This is going to be fun.
Yep.
And lately, they can't put
anything together.
Much together at all.
No.
And I mean, even from Q1 with Alonso spinning out, and he was saying in interviews that he was struggling with the car from the get-go. And I don't know. It's like, did everybody else make that much more improvement throughout the season that it's making them look worse, or is whatever they're trying negatively affecting them?
It seems like a little bit of both, almost. Yeah. Or they're just not understanding their upgrades well enough, and so they're not able to obviously optimize their packages every weekend like some of these other teams have been doing, like a McLaren.
Well, right, and it's sad to watch because when I heard they were bringing Alonso on, I was so excited because I love when they bring kind of OG drivers back to help develop the team and help get them going. And I was happy when Vettel was on the team too. I was like, okay, Aston's gonna be a fun team to watch. But I still think you can have all this knowledge and all this developmental whatever you want to call it, but then your quote unquote second driver is still Stroll. That's not helping the team at all.
Yeah,
at all. And
if it was anybody else, he'd be out. He'd be out at the end of the year.
Yes.
No questions asked.
Even any other team, I believe,
right,
with his track record and the points that he just doesn't put up, but being Papa owns the team, that's where I asked earlier, how long can you keep this up where you have to admit you need somebody else?
Right.
And Alonso's not going to be around much longer.
Right, so who's going to carry it?
Yes. So now you don't even have your kind of lower-end driver and then your skilled driver who was helping build the team. They're all gone. And I don't know. It sucks because I really do like Aston Martin as a brand, and I liked them as a team. But now they're just slowly fading away.
Yeah. Yep.
Which sucks. So
disappointing. Another disappointing weekend from Aston Martin. That kind of rounds out the rest of the race weekend. Kind of go through the standings quickly. You don't want to get into too much detail. Obviously, Max world champion. Sergio,
what?
Yeah. It's a big surprise.
Wow.
Sergio's hanging on second, Hamilton third. Carlos and Fernando Alonso are now tied at $183. Norris 14 behind them at 169, and Leclerc 166. Russell 151. So that's top 8.
It still seems weird to hear that Leclerc is that far down.
Yeah, and behind Carlos, but Carlos has had a good year. He's got the race win, the only non.
Well, no, I think Carlos has been way more consistent than Leclerc.
100%. Constructors, Red Bull, Mercedes. Mercedes is what, 22 points ahead of Ferrari? So
I was going to say that's been a close battle pretty much all year.
Yep, with 3 races left, so still opportunity there. McLaren, I think, is settling into 4th now. I don't think they'll catch Ferrari. They had a little bit of optimism a couple races ago, but I think that's all but gone now. They're a good 95 points behind, 96, 97. Aston Martin settling into 5th. No risk of losing to Alpine, who's at 101 points. Williams, 28. AlphaTauri, like we talked about earlier. P8 with 16 points, tied with Romeo. And Haas at 12. Tough weekend for them, dropping down to the bottom of the table again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that kind of recaps Mexico. Anything you want to talk about Brazil next weekend?
Anything you want
to look
Can I ask you one thing? And I already wrote this down, so I'm pretty much cheating. If you had to pick 3 winners and 3 losers, and I'm not talking just DNF. I'm not talking pole.
Talking about just race weekend overall.
Just in general, if you had to pick 3 that you really were like, that was awesome.
Max wins another race. I think he sets the record for podiums, or at least ties his record for podiums.
16? No, he
no
beat
podiums. He's at 18.
Race wins is what he beat.
Yes.
It was 15 and now it's 16 in a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, another, record for him. Good for him. He's having a heck of a year, obviously. He's got the best car, and he's very consistent, and he's driving the hell out of it.
Easy answer, go.
Yeah. Ricardo. Ricardo, big weekend for him. Shows he's kind of returned, hopefully back to his old form, and hopefully he can keep it that way. I don't think anybody expects that car to be in P4 the rest of the races.
No.
In qualifying, at least. But expect him to hopefully continue his form. And I think Norris, in the end, ends up being a big winner. It's hard. Him and Hamilton. Hamilton had a big weekend, too.
All right, so I love it. Because, for my 3 winners of the weekend, I had Norris, Ham, and Ricardo.
Yeah.
Just because I think Max at this point is just kind of a given that it's like, yay, again. Yeah. But no, Norris with all the overtakes, the fights. Hamilton with that awesome second place, the consistent, great drive. And then everyone, I think, is just happy to see Ricardo back up there.
Yep.
So I think, we basically agreed, other than you went for the easy one with Max. All right, your 3 losers for the weekend.
Yuki's one.
Agreed.
If he would have kept that car on the points, that would have been huge for the team and him.
Yeah, because with him and Ricardo up there would have been massive. But he just started driving like a wild child.
Yep. Checo, obviously. But I honestly don't think it's as bad as it looks. In the way I know.
I do.
In terms of damaging, how do I phrase this? Yes, he crashed out on turn 1.
Damaging the spirit of a nation.
Fair point. But he crashed out of turn 1. But his weekend previous to that was much better than a lot of his other ones. He qualified fairly close to Max. I think he was only a 10th behind instead of a half second. He was on the pace most of the weekend. He had an excellent start. It was probably the best start he had all year.
Right. And that's where it's like,
just
buddy, if you would have just tapped the brakes and let it, I easily believe he could have been podium this weekend.
Oh, no doubt.
Especially the way that Ferrari was and them still having issues with making up their decisions with what their plan is going to be, which is an ongoing thing. I really believe that he tried to win the race in corner 1.
Yeah,
and if he would have stepped off,
tried.
It could have been a totally different race.
Yep.
All right, so you got Yuki and Perez. Who else?
Oh, man. I guess I'd have to say Alonso because he had such a bad weekend.
I cheated.
I don't know if...
I cheated and said Aston Martin.
Oh. That's fair. We can go with
just
that.
In general.
We can go with that. Brazilian GP's next weekend, so the last of the back-to-back-to-back races.
Which is a lot of fun. I like...
Sao Paulo is a great track.
Yes.
It's fun to watch. It's kind of old-school track. It's got some gravel, although I think they paved a lot of the runoff. But
They paved a lot, and...
grass is close.
I think, aside Monaco, it's one of the smaller pit lanes. So
it's short.
Yeah, so that is one of the big issues at Brazil is if all of a sudden everybody and their brother wants to come in and start pitting, that there can be incidences. And I know it's tough for even the pit crews have said notoriously Monaco and
Sao Paulo
they're tight and they're like anything can happen.
Yep.
So that's something to watch out for too, because I think a lot of times like the pit crews kind of get overlooked, but then when you get into these more condensed tracks, you can see the chaos.
It's a little bit more stress on them as well versus some of these new tracks. Like if you see, Vegas, I think I heard Vegas is going to have one of the bigger pit lanes.
Well, isn't going to also have the biggest straight too.
The biggest and baddest.
They can just do whatever they want.
But there's a reason why Sao Paulo's used to be the finishing or the championship decider per se.
Just to catch up, I did watch really quick the highlights from last year, and it was a high contact race. Yeah. Everybody was just slapping into each other, and it's a really good course for passing, I feel like, but a lot of those corners that are great for passing have
high risk.
They have their consequences.
Yeah.
So I think
high risk, high reward.
And what we've been seeing these last couple races with how some of our friends have been trying to get around their friends, it might be wild.
Yeah.
It really might be. And I'm actually, I normally, this time of the year, I feel like are some of my least favorite tracks because normally, like, it's like you already know who's going to be the champion. You already know the constructors champion. Maybe there's some people duking it out somewhere midfield, but Mexico really brought me back into...
Mexico's always fun, I feel like.
Yeah.
Or at least it feels fun.
But, like, just the way that everything went down, and now I'm ready for Brazil. And I love these back-to-back-to-back race weekends because sometimes you kind of, you calm down from it, and you're like, whatever. But when it's back-to-back, you go right into the weekend going, I remember what happened.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Right. I'm ready to go again.
I know what you just did.
The teams don't like it, but us as fans.
No, it's hard.
Enjoy it.
It's definitely hard on the teams and hard on everyone. But also that shows too the resilience of some of the other teams that can thrive through this back-to-back-to-back.
Right.
And then the other ones where you can tell
they're kind of losing it a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't blame them.
Well, no, it's a lot.
Tough.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Anything else you got?
No. I had a great race weekend. Very unexpected. I just kind of thought it was going to be, and honestly, if it wasn't for Meg having that crash, I think everyone they had already pitted. They already had
settled.
They had their strategy set, and I was kind of sitting in going, here we go. We're just going to let it ride out.
Right.
And that changed everything, and it was wild. And so, no, I'm excited for Brazil, and hopefully I can join you again and do this because I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too.
Cool.
Very excited for Brazil next weekend, and glad you could join me this week. This has been your host, Jordan Wynn, and this week,
Mikhail Payne. Yeah.
And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next episode of The Pit Lane, where we'll review Brazilian Grand Prix, hopefully next week. Talk to you then. Thank you.
Thank you.